All right, moving on to our season preview for the Milwaukee Bucks. So our offseason recap. They lost Grayson Allen, Javon Carter, Goran Dragic, Drew Holiday, Joe Ingles, Myers Leonard, and Wesley Matthews. They added Malik Beasley, Robin Lopez, Cam Payne, Ty Washington, a backup guard for the Rockets last year. Drew Timme is a Milwaukee Buck. And Damian Lillard, who we're going to talk about in a little bit. Their depth chart as of right now, Damian Lillard, Pat Connaughton, Malik Beasley, Cam Payne, and Ty Washington at guard. At forward, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Chris Middleton, Marjan Beauchamp, Jay Crowder, Bobby Portis, depending on who you ask. And then Brook Lopez, Robin Lopez, and Drew Timme. Now, why was the Damian Lillard trade the right move? And before I frame this, I want to talk about like kind of the devil's advocate case against it, right? Because there were some, galaxy brain people out there trying to overthink it. And the case was basically you give up Grayson Allen in the deal, who's a starting NBA 2 guard. And he was particularly important to the Bucks last year because not only was he an outstanding spot-up player, but he specifically was very good at deep above the break threes. So, like, you could position him on the left wing or on the right wing, like 25, 26 feet away from the basket, and he was going to pull that defender away from digging down because he could consistently knock that shot down. So he was pretty important, right? And then, obviously, you give up your best and most versatile perimeter defender in Drew Holiday, right? And a guy who was a huge part of their defensive identity when they won the title in 2021. I'd argue he was their second most important defensive player, right? So, like, that's the devil's advocate case. You give up that depth at the starting 2-guard spot and you give up your defensive identity. But here's the harsh truth. And this is, again, like, I talk all the time about NBA front offices and being honest with what your predicament is, even above and beyond wins and losses. Because, like, whatever happened last year, it doesn't necessarily, have anything to do with what your current predicament is, right? So, like, you won the title in 2021, and it's completely legitimate, but that doesn't mean that your next title is going to look like that. It might have to look different, right? And see, here's the thing. You won your title in 2021 off the strength of your defensive identity. But every playoff defeat outside of that over the last 5 years has come down to the same thing every single time. Half-court offense. It's getting stuck in the half-court against a better half-court shot creator on the other team and not being able to score. Like, again, like there was some hope, especially after 2021 when he had the free throw shooting performance in Game 6 in the finals. There was some hope that Giannis would polish up as a scorer, right? And polish up as a free throw shooter, and that would fix the half-court offense issues. But instead, the opposite is happening. Giannis dropped back below 65% from the foul line last year. It was his worst mark from the foul line since 2020. And last year, on shot attempts outside of the restricted area, Giannis was 171 for 560. That's 30.5%. He doesn't even have a reliable hook shot. He only made 13 all season last year on 35%, and he was 2 for 7 in the playoffs. And this is not a young player anymore. He's been in the league 10 seasons. He's going into his 11th season. So that ship has sailed. And that's what I mean by self-awareness and acknowledging problems in the front office. You have to acknowledge the reality of your specific situation. Self-awareness is the only pathway to identifying your flaws and making whatever changes need to be made so that you can be better off in the long run, right? And it's clear to me the Dame trade signifies the Bucks front office acknowledging Giannis is never going to become that guy. He's never going to be the guy who's going to be able to out-execute the best superstars in the league in the half-court offensively. So that's why it's worth giving up your 2-guard. That's why it's worth giving up your defensive identity. If you can take the biggest flaw in Giannis's game and turn it into something that's actually a strength for your team. Again, you won the title in 2021. It was legit. As legit as any title in NBA history. I'm not undercutting it, but let's talk about what happened. You faced an injury-riddled Nets team, right? With James Harden on a bad hamstring and Kyrie Irving out of the lineup. You faced the Atlanta Hawks, who were a good basketball team, but not your typical conference finalist, right? And then you faced a Suns team in the final that did not have a top 10 player on the roster. So that defensive identity was good enough to overcome those circumstances. But usually in NBA history, you have to face one of those top-tier shot creators. You have to face a LeBron. You have to face a Steph. You have to face a Jokic. You have to face a Luka. That's usually the kind of guy you have to face in those settings, right? You lost in 2019 to a Raptors team that had a better half-court offense. You lost in 2020 to a Miami Heat team that had a better half-court offense. 2022, I would say it was mostly the Chris Middleton injury, but chances are they would have run into Steph and had the exact same problem, a half-court offense that can't compete with what Steph can do, right? And then you lost in 2023 because of your half-court offense once again. The Bucks notched a clutch net rating of minus 53.8 in their 2 losses against the Miami Heat that involved clutch situations. They had a 77 offensive rating in those situations. They couldn't score. Time and time again, that's been the issue. And again, it doesn't take away from the title. The title is the title is the title. But if you look at the 5-year window, it's been 4 losses at the hands of half-court shot creation or an injury that would have eventually lost because of half-court shot creation, and then your title in the middle where you didn't have to face one of those teams. So I think it was the right decision to understand the limitations of this roster and to make a move that puts your team in a better chance to compete at a year-in, year-out basis. Because had you run it back, the only way you're winning is if all of the top-tier shot creators somehow get knocked out. And you end up running into some team like Minnesota in the finals, which just isn't going to happen, right? So I thought this was the right decision. Giannis, in my opinion, is by far the best player in the world if you remove that slow down half court environment, right? Like he's top 5 defensive player in the world, by far the best transition player in the world. He's a very, very good passer. He does all these things exceedingly well, but he just can't make shots over the top of the defense, right? And so like that's where that limitation and again, like Jrue Holiday and Chris Middleton were good players, but they were never consistently good enough to overcome that. Now, will they have defensive questions to answer with Dame? Of course. But now at the very least, when they end up in these slow down half-court environments against the best shot creators in the league, they have one of the top tier guys in the league too in that situation. Not to mention in general throughout the whole season and throughout the entire playoff run, you've just given a much better offensive firepower to your offense that will make Giannis's job easier, that will allow him to devote more resources to what he's best at, which is dominating games on the defensive end of the floor, which is being that freight train in transition that nobody can stop. Do you remember in that Celtics series in 2022 how tired Giannis looked at the end? And he still almost won it. Imagine what he can do as a wrecking ball in games when Dame can take 2/3 of those offensive slow-down half-court possessions. Then we have the natural synergy of the Dame Giannis two-man game. And I want to dive into this concept for a little bit because I think it's I've seen a lot of people have talked about how it's going to be impossible to guard, including myself, but I wanted to dive into it schematically for a little bit. And, to me, it comes down to getting dribble penetration and getting teams into rotation. Like I said at the very beginning of the show, getting a defense in rotation is kind of the theme of this show. And the reason why is because it's just an easier way to play basketball. Think of it simply, okay? I'm guarding you. You're where the camera is. If I'm just standing here, ready to go, sitting in a defensive stance with my hand up, it's going to be a lot harder for you to score than if I'm 10 feet further back and I'm sprinting at you full speed in a closeout. Right? That's pretty simple concept, right? But the only way you were going to get that situation is if one of your other offensive players at the beginning of the possession, when the defense is set, can draw a help defender. Because once you draw the help defender, that's what leaves you open, which allows me to make that pass. And from there, the defense is in rotation. You pump fake and beat me off the dribble. Now you engage another help defender, which leaves another open player, right? And then you can drive and kick until you get the right shot, which is going to be a wide open 3 or a layup or a dunk at the basket, right? But the only way you can get a defense in rotation is to get dribble penetration. And again, dribble penetration does not have to be me beating my guy off the dribble, right? And we know Giannis can do that. But there are other ways to generate dribble penetration. What if you just beat someone backdoor, right? Standing on the sideline, guys overplaying the passing lane, I cut back door. You hit me with a bounce pass, I'm going to draw a help defender, right? And then a big one is slipping ball screens. Come to set a ball screen, then I slip to the basket, you throw the ball over the top. If both defenders are behind me, you're going to have to send a help defender. Now you're in rotation. So you can find opportunities to get the defense in rotation without having to say, Giannis, beat this guy off the dribble, right? And so that's where the Damian Lillard, Giannis two-man game comes into the picture. It creates advantage situations. And it's just way easier to play basketball that way when you have an advantage versus when defenses are set. This is why every defense tries to guard ISOs one-on-one, tries to guard post-ups one-on-one, tries to guard pick and roll and dribble handoffs 2-on-2, tries to guard Spain pick and roll and other three-man actions 3-on-3. They do that because they're trying to stay out of rotation, because they know if they're in rotation, they're going to give up open threes, they're going to give up open layups, and they're going to give up offensive rebounds because guys aren't matched up. I talked about that at the beginning of the show, but that first Damian Lillard Giannis pick and roll, they got the wide open three for Jay Crowder at the beginning of the Laker game. It was a missed three, but Brook Lopez ended up breaking open for the offensive rebound because the Lakers were in rotation and they weren't matched up. Getting the opponent's defense into rotation is the key to any offensive success. And so this is where that two-man game comes into the picture. So let's talk about all the different ways. And when I say two-man game, it could look a bunch of different ways, right? Like it could be a Dame Giannis pick and roll where Giannis just simply comes up and sets a ball screen. It could be a dribble handoff. It could be off of a wide pin down, right? Like it could just be Brook standing at the top of the key, Dame in the corner, Giannis at the elbow, Giannis goes down and sets a screen for Dame coming off. Any form of two-man game involving those two will put you in the same predicament. First is let's talk about the different defensive coverages you could run against this action and what would happen if you did, right? So first of all, if you run a deep drop coverage, right? Meaning, we also call this a no roller behind coverage, meaning the big man, the screen defender, in the pick and roll has to keep both the roller and the ball handler in front of him. So if the roller is rolling hard, he's backing up with him. In that kind of coverage, what's going to happen with Damian Lillard? He's going to come off of these ball screens, and he's going to hit a bunch of pull-up threes, pull-up twos, and floaters. And again, the vast majority of guys in the league, you live with that. With Jrue Holiday, you live with that. He's not going to make enough of them. He's not going to make enough pull-up threes. He's not going to make enough floaters. He's not going to make enough 15-footers, right? But Dame is like one of just a small handful of guys that it's like, if we give him these shots, he's not just going to make them, he's going to make them at an untenable rate, meaning he's going to be scoring 1.2, 1.3 points per possession when you run a deep drop coverage against him. That's not tenable. You will lose playoff series that way. So that's option one. That doesn't work. Now, the upside there is your defense stays out of rotation. And that might end up being the best way to guard them for the simple fact that maybe Dame gets tired and he misses shots. But that's suicide. You're not going to see a lot of teams run deep drop against against Milwaukee for that reason. So that's option one. Option two is switching. Theoretically, they run a two-man game, you switch the action, now they have to ISO or post up, right? If you switch properly and you prevent them from slipping. Here's the problem. This isn't LeBron and AD. The LeBron and AD pick and roll, everyone's like, oh, the LeBron and AD pick and roll, it's going to be so hard to guard. It has never been that damaging over the entire era. Why? Because who do you guard LeBron with? A big, strong forward that can slide his feet. Who do you guard Anthony Davis with? A big, strong forward that can slide his feet. So you could switch, and it's more or less the same type of advantage, right? But the type of guy you need to guard Dame is extremely different from the type of guy you need to guard Giannis. You need a big, strong forward who moves his feet well to guard Giannis. You need a quick, nimble athlete with long arms to guard Dame. And that quick, nimble athlete is going to get pulverized in the post by Giannis. And that big, strong forward that moves his feet well is going to get absolutely barbecued by Damian Lillard. And it's either going to be Giannis catching in the post, an immediate double team, which gets your defense in rotation, or it's going to be Dame beating his man off the dribble, the big man off the dribble, which is going to get your defense in rotation. Or you can force Dame to take step-back threes by giving him space, which he's going to make at such a high rate it's untenable anyway, because he's one of the small handful of guys in the league that you can't afford to give that shot to. So switching, not going to work. Last is any sort of aggressive pick and roll coverage. So a high drop where you're dropping, but you're way up at the level of the screen, or a show where you actually come out above the level of the screen to stop the guard from turning the corner and then you recover back, or any sort of blitz or trap. And that's where both guys just double team and actually force Dame to get rid of the basketball. In any of those situations, Dame has been facing that coverage forever because he's been playing with lower quality role men than Giannis over the years. And so it's been smart for teams to blitz and trap and high hedge and to show to high drop against Dame, right? And so he knows how to make the over-the-top pass or the pocket pass to Giannis barreling down the basket. And now you put yourself in a predicament where and we saw this a bunch with the Lakers with Christian Wood, right? If Christian Wood's going to do a hedge or a high show or a high drop, that means Giannis is rolling behind him. Now when that pass is made, you have D'Angelo Russell and Christian Wood on Damian Lillard 25 feet from the basket. Now Giannis is barreling down the hill, running a 4-on-3. And in a lot of cases, his roll gravity is so crazy, he'll pull multiple defenders, which he literally did against the Lakers. There were multiple pick and rolls where there were multiple wide open shooters. That's the predicament they put you in. Oh, and Giannis is one of the best rim finishers in the league and one of the best passers for his position. So to put it simply, there is no defensive strategy that can successfully guard the Giannis Dame pick and roll without either conceding a jump shot to one of the best jump shooters in the history of the NBA, or putting your defense into rotation, which allows the other team to play, which allows your offense to play with an advantage the entire game. So in short, everyone is screwed. I literally can't. If I was coaching against the Bucks, your best bet is to find the very best point of attack defender on your roster, put him on Dame, and pray to God he misses. That's a tough spot to be in. You run a deeper drop, take away those 4-on-3s, take away those roll man possessions, and you pray he misses. It's probably not going to work. But there's some questions about this Bucks roster, so let's dig into them a little bit. Can the Bucks piece together a functional rotation around those two guys? The first question is the two-guard spot. This was the Grayson Allen spot. We talked about it earlier, but he was a deadly spot-up threat, and specifically with deep three-point shooting and the value that brought. So in the Laker game, they started Malik Beasley. I covered him with the Lakers last year. He's just not very good. He was out of the rotation for the Lakers after the Grizzlies series. He's a really aggressive shooter that just doesn't really make shots. And he doesn't attack closeouts really well because he can't put the ball on the floor and he doesn't have a mid-range game. He converted 104 spot-up opportunities for the Lakers last year into just 75 points. That's 0.72 points per possession. And trust me, they were pretty damn good looks as teams were loading up on LeBron and AD and Austin and D'Lo and all those guys. He was also one of the worst defenders on the Lakers last year. Now, he did shoot much better a couple years ago, so maybe he gets to the point where he shoots better. But again, the defense and rebounding limitations, I think, make him not a great option. The second option is Pat Connaughton. And he had a down shooting year last year, but even despite of that, he still converted spot-up possessions at 1.05 points per possession, which is solid. And if you go back 2 years, the 2022 season, he was one of the best spot-up players in the league. Shot 60% in effective field goal percentage on catch-and-shoot jump shots. He converted spot-up possessions at 1.16 points per possession, which is outstanding. Now, he's not as athletic as Malik Beasley, but he is a little bigger and a little stronger. He's a better rebounder, and he's a more committed and smarter team defender. So I think in the long run, unless they make a trade for a two-guard, I think Pat Connaughton is actually the better option to go in that spot. I don't think you can go with Cam Payne because then you're way too small. So Pat Connaughton, to me, feels like the guy who inevitably ends up starting at the 2 in the long run. The second question is depth, and I'm not super concerned here. Cam Payne is a perfectly fine backup guard. He's actually one of the best guards in the league at generating dribble penetration, which we just talked about for a while, how important that is. He's just so damn fast. Guys can't keep him in front. Malik Beasley, again, for all his flaws, perfectly fine as a backup guard. Marjon Beauchamp has looked pretty good in preseason so far. Jay Crowder is perfectly fine as a backup 4, right? And both of those guys kind of are the different archetypes, right? Jay Crowder, the bigger, stronger 4. Marjon, the longer, more athletic forward, right? And then Robin Lopez and Bobby Portis are a perfectly fine backup front court, right? So I don't necessarily worry too much about their depth. Obviously, they can't withhold a season full of injuries, but there's not a whole lot of teams in the league that can. The biggest question is their playoff rotation, right? Like, you got to have at least 8 guys that you can trust. Well, you got 4 right away. Giannis, Dame, Chris, and Brook. There's 4. Pat, I've seen him play a role in a playoff team. I think he can be fine. I thought he played really well for the 2022 Bucks. So you really just need 3 more out of Jay Crowder, Bobby Portis, who I think both of them will be fine. That's 7. So you really just need one of Campaign, Malik Beasley, or Marjan Beauchamp to pop before the end of the season, and or to find someone in the trade or buyout market, right? So, like, again, you need injury luck, but NBA history tells us you need injury luck anyway to win the title. So I'm not overly concerned about their depth. The only real question mark that has me somewhat concerned about this team is their point of attack defense. They have the star talent. They have the shooting. They have the defensive foundation of Giannis and Brook in the front court, but they are not a good perimeter defense team on paper. Like if you face, there are certain teams that it might not matter against. Like if you face Miami tomorrow in the playoffs, you're fine with Chris Middleton guarding Jimmy Butler. None of those other guards are going to hurt you enough for it to matter. But specific matchups, teams like Cleveland, multiple shot creators in the backcourt, right? Teams like Boston are loaded with shot creation, right? Like Philly has a little bit of that with Tyrese Maxey and James Harden potentially, right? Teams in the Western Conference they could see in the finals. Teams like Golden State, teams like Denver, teams like Phoenix. There are a lot of teams that are going to have a lot of perimeter options that they can go at the Bucks with. And so that's going to be the one thing that I'm going to have to look at with them over the course of the season and whether or not that could be a problem. And again, like we talked about that defensive rotation concept, that goes both ways. If your point of attack defenders are giving up too easy dribble penetration, then your defense is in rotation all the time, which can be a problem. But here's where I'm at with it. I think you can guard Cleveland just like New York did, right? Because of the Evan Mobley, Jared Allen problem, a guy like Brook Lopez is going to be able to kind of split that difference and guard both of those guys as Evan Mobley's rolling down to the basket. So I'm not too worried about Cleveland. I know they brought in some shooting, but it's the front court that I think makes them easy to guard. Miami's not going to hit enough pull-up jump shots, not unless they make a trade. Philly, I don't think, is going to hit enough pull-up jump shots. Boston, I think they have enough aggregate ball handling to really spread the Bucks out and cause some problems. But their execution is so sloppy, I never trust their offense to really be a weapon at that phase. It's the West where I really start to get concerned. Teams like Denver, teams like Golden State, teams like Phoenix that have a ton of pull-up shooting, a ton of perimeter talent. Those are the teams that are going to be able to pull Brook Lopez and pull Giannis away from the rim and get them into rotation. But again, those dynamics play both ways, right? Like if you've got a team that's able to stretch the Bucks out, they're going to be doing the same thing to you on the other end with Dame and pick and roll. So again, it goes both ways. I just think it's something that's worth mentioning. Pat Connaughton, Malik Beasley, Damian Lillard, Marjan Beauchamp, that's Jay Crowder at this phase in his career. Chris Middleton's a pretty good point of attack defender, but he's not great. So that's going to be a limitation for them. And, even against a team like Boston, you're going to have to ask Giannis to guard one of the either Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. So they're definitely not going to be as good as they were defensively last year. And, as far as predictions go for this season, that's where I have to start because I do think that the Bucks will go down a level in the regular season. Like, I think the Celtics are going to run away with the 1 seed. I bet you they have about a 5-game lead over everybody when it's all said and done. They just aren't as good defensively and aren't as deep, the Bucks, which I think is going to hurt them over the course of the regular season. But at the end of the day, you shrink the rotation, you combine the Giannis Dame factor in a playoff series. I just trust them a tiny bit more to generate higher quality shots than Boston over the course of a 7-game series, which is going to be a slow down, knockdown, drag out fight of a series, right? And I also expect Giannis to be much more devastating in the margins of the game without the offensive workload he had to carry in the past. So that's where I'm at with the Bucks right now. I think they're going to win the Eastern Conference. They're my pick to win the East. But as of right now, I'm going with the Denver Nuggets at number 1 in my power rankings. I think they're the team that has proven it, obviously most recently, but they got the best player in the world, the best offense in the world, the most unguardable offense in the world. I'm going with the Nuggets for right now. We'll do a full season preview on them later this week.